The perfect day that wasn't. The cathedral bells chimed 11 times as Sofia Martinez adjusted her grandmother's pearl necklace one final time. Her reflection stared back from the ornate mirror in the bridal suite of St. Augustine's Church. Ivory silk cascading in perfect waves, her dark hair swept into an elegant chignon beneath the delicate lace veil that had graced 3 generations of Martinez women. "You look absolutely radiant, darling," her mother cooed, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "Richard is the luckiest man alive."
Wedding nerves are totally normal. But this wasn't nerves. This was something else entirely. A growing knot of unease that had been tightening in her chest for weeks, maybe months. Sofia had attributed it to pre-wedding stress, to the endless decisions about flowers and place settings, and whether the string quartet should play Pachelbel or Bach during the processional. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. "5 minutes, ladies," called Father Murphy through the door. Sofia's mother gathered the train of the dress, fussing with the French lace imported specially from Lyon.
"Mom, can I have a moment alone?" Sofia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course, darling. Jessica and I will go check on the flowers one more time." Her mother kissed her cheek, careful not to disturb the makeup that had taken 2 hours to perfect. The door closed with a soft click, leaving Sofia alone with her reflection and the weight of what she was about to do. In 20 minutes, she would walk down that aisle to marry a man who was, by all accounts, perfect. Richard Weatherby III, Harvard MBA, junior partner at his father's investment firm, owner of a pristine colonial in Cambridge and a ski house in Vermont. He was handsome in that patrician way, with sandy hair and blue eyes that crinkled when he smiled at charity galas. Her phone buzzed on the vanity, a text from Richard. "Can't wait to make you Mrs. Weatherby. Love you." Mrs. Weatherby. The name felt foreign on her tongue, like a coat that didn't quite fit. For months, she'd been practicing the signature, but it never looked right in her handwriting. Another buzz, this time from her best friend from college, Maya, who couldn't make it from California. "Thinking of you today. Hope you're living your dreams, not someone else's." The words hit her like a physical blow. Living your dreams, not someone else's. When had her dreams become so small, so carefully curated to fit into someone else's vision of respectability? Sofia closed her eyes and remembered the girl she used to be, the one more than indie rock concerts. Then came the gentle hints about her bohemian style, accompanied by shopping trips to stores where everything cost more than her monthly rent. Her job as a social worker at the community center was admirable, according to Richard's mother, but perhaps not a long-term career for a Weatherby wife. A knock at the door made her jump. "Sofia?" It was Richard's voice, warm and familiar. "I know it's bad luck, but I just wanted to say—" "Don't come in!" she called out, panic rising in her throat. She couldn't face him right now, couldn't look into those kind eyes and see the future he'd planned for them both, the future she'd agreed to without ever really choosing it. "I just wanted you to know how proud I am of you. The way you've grown and changed this past year." They adored her now, after she'd sanded away all the rough edges that made her who she was. "I'll see you at the altar, darling." His footsteps retreated down the hall, and Sofia stared at herself in the mirror again. The woman looking back was beautiful, polished, perfect. She was also a stranger. Her hands were shaking as she reached for her phone and opened her photos. There, buried among recent shots of wedding preparations and engagement parties, she found what she was looking for. A picture from 2 years ago, at Maya's birthday party in San Francisco. Sofia was laughing at something off. Sofia thought about the reception that would follow. 300 guests dining on Richard's grandmother's china, speeches about their perfect match, The first dance to The Way You Look Tonight, because Richard thought their song, a silly pop tune they danced to drunkenly at a college party, wasn't appropriate for the occasion. She thought about the honeymoon in Tuscany, carefully planned by Richard's assistant, featuring museums and wine tastings and five-star restaurants where she'd have to remember to order sensibly. She thought about the life that would unfold after that, charity luncheons and country club memberships, the house in Cambridge where she'd learned to play hostess to Richard's colleagues, the pressure to start a family at the appropriate time, with children who would attend the right schools and learn to be proper little Weatherbys. It was a good life, a privileged life. Many women would kill for such security, such comfort. So why did it feel like a beautiful prison?
Sophia, dear, it's time. Her mother's voice carried a note of barely contained excitement as the door opened again. Jessica peered around the corner, bouquet in hand. "You ready for this?" Jessica asked, but something in her expression suggested she saw what Sophia was trying so hard to hide. Sophia stood slowly, the weight of the dress suddenly feeling enormous. The cathedral organ began the processional music, Bach's Jesus, Joy of Man's Desiring, chosen by the wedding planner because it was classic and appropriate. "Actually," Sophia heard herself say, "I don't think I am." Her mother, who had been adjusting the train, froze. "What did you say?" "I said, I don't think I'm ready." Jessica moved closer, her face creased with concern. "Soph, honey, what's wrong?" What was wrong? Where could she even begin? That she'd spent 2 years becoming someone she didn't recognize? That the man waiting for her at the altar was wonderful and kind and absolutely wrong for her? That she'd been so busy trying to fit into his world that she'd forgotten she had her own? "I can't do this," she whispered, then louder, "I can't do this." Her mother's face went white. "Sophia, you're just having cold feet. Every bride—" "No, Mom." Sophia's voice was gaining strength. "This isn't cold feet. This is me realizing I'm about to marry the wrong person." "The wrong person?" Her mother's voice pitched higher. "Richard is wonderful. He's successful, he's from a good family, he loves you. He loves who he thinks I should be. And I've been so busy trying to be that person that I forgot who I actually am." Jessica was watching her with wide eyes. "Sophia, there are 300 people out there. Richard is waiting at the altar. The reception is paid for, the flowers, the band." "I know." Sophia's hands were steady now as she reached up and carefully removed her grandmother's necklace. "I know all of that. But Jessica, if I walk down that aisle, I'm not just marrying Richard, I'm burying myself." Her mother sank into the velvet chair by the window. "I don't understand. Richard is everything we ever wanted for you." "Everything you wanted for me," Sophia corrected gently. "I wanted adventure. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to see the world and help people and wear my hair curly because I liked it that way." She was crying now, but her voice was clear. "Do you know he asked me to straighten my hair for the engagement photos, said it would look more polished in the society pages? And I did it. I straightened it, and I smiled, and I pretended it was no big deal." "Compromise? What has Richard compromised?" The question hung in the air. "Has he changed his career plans for me? His friends? His family traditions? Has he learned Spanish to talk to Abuela or shown any interest in the community center where I used to work?" Her mother opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. "He hasn't," Sophia continued, "because this was never about two people changing and growing together. This was about me changing to fit into his life. and I let it happen because it seemed easier than figuring out what I actually wanted. Through the window, she could see the guests settling into the pews, programs rustling in their hands. Richard would be standing at the altar now, checking his watch, probably assuming I was just running a few minutes late as usual. He'd be thinking about their honeymoon itinerary, about the house they'd live in, about the dinner party they'd host for his colleagues next month.
"Honey," Jessica said carefully, "what are you going to do?" Sophia looked at her reflection one more time. The dress was beautiful, layers of silk and lace that had cost more than her car. But it wasn't her dress. Nothing about this wedding was really hers. Not the venue Richard's family had suggested, not the menu his mother had approved, not the guest list that had been carefully curated to include the right people. "I'm going to leave," she said simply. Her mother shot to her feet. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." "But the scandal, what will people think? The Weatherbys will never forgive us, and your father's business—" "Mom," Sophia took her mother's hands. "I love you. I love Dad. But I can't live my life worried about what other people think. I've been doing that for 2 years, and look where it's gotten me." She moved to the small window and looked down at the street below. A few late guests were hurrying up the church steps, but the sidewalk was otherwise empty. Freedom was just 20 feet away. "Where will you go?" Jessica asked quietly. She'd been Sophia's roommate in college. She knew about the dreams that had been slowly packed away like winter clothes. "I don't know," Sophia admitted, "but that's the first exciting thing I've said in months." Her mother was pacing now, wringing her hands. "Think about your future, Sophia, your security. Richard can provide. I can provide for myself." Sophia's voice was firm. "I have a master's degree and 2 hands and a brain. I don't need someone else to take care of me." She gathered up the train of her dress and walked to the door. Her mother stepped in front of her. "Please," her mother begged, "just think about this for 5 more minutes. You're about to throw away the best thing that's ever happened to you." Sophia paused, her hand on the door handle. For a moment, doubt crept in. Richard was a good man. Their life together would be comfortable, secure, respectable. Her parents were proud of this match. Everyone expected her to go through with it. Then she remembered the photograph on her phone, the girl with the wild hair and bright eyes who believed she could change the world. "Mom," she said softly, "Richard isn't the best thing that's ever happened to me. The best thing is that I'm finally remembering who I am." The hallway outside the bridal suite stretched endlessly in both directions. To the right lay the main staircase that led to the cathedral nave, where 300 people waited, and Richard stood in his morning coat, probably wondering where she was. The left was a service stairway that led to the side exit, where the catering staff had been bringing in supplies all morning. Sophia turned left. The narrow stairway was dim and utilitarian, so different from the grand marble steps she'd climbed just hours ago for photos. Her heels clicked against the worn wood as she gathered her train in her arms, the expensive fabric bunching awkwardly as she navigated the tight turns. Behind her, she could hear her mother's voice rising in panic. "Jessica, call your father. No, wait, call Richard. Tell him she needs 5 more minutes." But there was no 5 more minutes. There was only the narrow shaft of light coming from the side door below, promising escape. The service entrance opened onto a quiet street that ran parallel to the main entrance. Sophia had never noticed this little alley before, despite having attended services at St. Augustine since childhood. It was lined with old brownstones and small shops, kind of neighborhood she'd once loved exploring before her life became a series of
appropriate venues, and suitable activities. The September afternoon was warm and bright, and the wedding dress that had felt so perfect in the climate-controlled bridal suite now seemed impossibly heavy and conspicuous. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, suddenly aware that she was a woman in a full wedding gown, with nowhere to go and no plan beyond the desperate need to escape. Her phone buzzed incessantly in the small beaded purse Jessica had insisted she carry. She didn't need to look to know it was a barrage of increasingly frantic texts from family members, wedding party, maybe even Richard himself by now. A taxi turned the corner, its yellow bulk miraculous in this residential neighborhood. Sophia waved frantically, and to her amazement, it pulled over. The driver, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair, rolled down her window and stared.
"Honey," she said in a warm Brooklyn accent, "please tell me you're not running away from your wedding." "Okay," Sophia said, gathering her skirts. "I won't tell you that." The driver laughed despite herself. "Get in before someone sees you." Sophia wrestled the dress into the back seat, yards of silk and tulle spilling over the worn upholstery. The driver watched in the rearview mirror as she struggled with the train. 23 years I've been driving this cab, and you're my first runaway bride. I'm Dolores, by the way." "Sophia." She was breathing hard, adrenaline making her hands shake. "And thank you. I didn't know what I was going to do." "Well, first things first, where are we going?" The question hung in the air. Where was she going? Her apartment was actually Richard's apartment now. She'd moved in with him 6 months ago, and most of her belongings were already packed for their move to the Cambridge house after the honeymoon. Her parents' house was out of the question. They'd drag her back to the cathedral. Jessica would be fielding phone calls from every member of the wedding party. "I have no idea," Sophia admitted. Dolores pulled away from the curb, glancing at her passenger in the rearview mirror. "Rough day?" "The roughest," Sophia said, then found herself laughing. But also maybe the best. "You want to talk about it? I got daughters. I've seen my share of relationship drama." As they drove through the familiar streets of Boston, Sophia found herself telling this stranger everything about the slow erosion of herself over the past 2 years, about the dreams she'd tucked away, about the moment in the bridal suite when she'd realized she was about to promise the rest of her life to someone she wasn't even sure she liked anymore. "The thing is," Sophia said, watching the city pass by through the window, "Richard's not a bad person. He's actually wonderful, in his way. But he fell in love with the idea of me, you know? The version of me that could fit into his world perfectly." "And you tried to be that version," Dolores said. It wasn't a question. "God, yes. I tried so hard. I bought the right clothes, said the right things, learned to make conversation about things I didn't care about. I became this polished, proper person who looked great on paper." "But you weren't happy." Sophia considered this. "I thought I was supposed to be grateful. Here's this successful, handsome man who wants to marry me and give me a beautiful life. What's wrong with me that that's not enough?" Dolores snorted. "Honey, there's nothing wrong with you. You know what's wrong? This idea that women should be grateful for any man who'll have us, even if it means disappearing ourselves in the process." They stopped at a red light and Dolores turned to face her fully. "My oldest daughter, she married young to a guy who was perfect on paper, just like your Richard. Nice house, good job, respectable family. But he wanted a wife who'd have dinner on the table at 6 and never disagree with him and basically exist to make his life easier." "What happened?" "She tried for 5 years to be that person, nearly killed herself trying. Finally left when she realized she was raising her daughter to think that's what women were supposed to do, disappear." The light turned green, and they continued through downtown Boston. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, warming the interior of the cab and making Sophia's dress shimmer. "So, where to, runaway bride? You got somewhere safe to go?"
Sophia thought about her options. There was Maya in San Francisco, but showing up unannounced on her doorstep in a wedding dress seemed like too much drama to dump on anyone. Her college roommate lived in New York now, but they'd lost touch over the past year as Sophia's world had shrunk to Richard's circle. Then she remembered something. Actually, can you take me to the community center on Washington Street? I used to work there.
The one in Jamaica Plain?
That's the one. As they drove toward her old neighborhood, Sophia felt something loosening in her chest. Jamaica Plain was nothing like the stately Cambridge streets where she'd been living with Richard. It was diverse and slightly shabby, and full of the kind of energy that came from people actually living their lives instead of just performing them. The Luis Rivera Community Center occupied a converted warehouse that had been... Sophie stood on the sidewalk, suddenly unsure of herself. It had been over a year since she'd left this job to focus on wedding planning and settling into her new life, as she'd explained to her colleagues at the time. What if they didn't remember her? What if they were too busy to deal with a woman having an emotional crisis in a wedding dress? The front door opened, and Carmen Rodriguez emerged, carrying a box of flyers. She was the center's director, a fierce woman in her 50s who'd been fighting for the community for over 2 decades. She looked up, saw Sophie, and dropped the box. Dios mío, Sophie? It was the first time in 2 years anyone had called her by the nickname she'd earned here, the Spanish diminutive that Carmen had bestowed on her during her first week when she'd mispronounced Señora Rodriguez so badly that everyone had burst into laughter. "Hi, Carmen," Sophia said, suddenly feeling ridiculous in her elaborate dress. "I know this is weird." Carmen was already moving toward her, arms outstretched. "Mija, what happened? Are you okay?" The hug was warm and fierce and smelled like the vanilla perfume Carmen had worn every day for as long as Sophia had known her. It was so different from the careful, air-kiss embraces she'd grown accustomed to in Richard's social circle that Sophia nearly started crying again. "I left my wedding," she said into Carmen's shoulder. "Today? Like just now?" "About an hour ago." "Jesus, Sophie, come inside." The familiar chaos of the community center enveloped Sophia like a warm blanket. Children were everywhere, some working on homework at mismatched tables, others playing games in the corner, a group of teenagers preparing for what looked like a dance performance in the main room. The walls were covered with colorful murals painted by local artists and photographs from community events going back decades. It was loud and messy and alive in a way that made Richard's carefully curated world seem like a museum exhibit by comparison. "Sophie!" a voice called from across the room, and Marcus Williams, the youth program coordinator, nearly tripped over a group of 8-year-olds in his haste to reach her. "What the heck? I mean, what are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be getting married today?" Word spread quickly through the center. Within minutes, Sophia found herself surrounded by familiar faces. Staff members she'd worked with, volunteers she'd trained, even some of the families she'd helped navigate the immigration system. Everyone was talking at once, asking questions, exclaiming over her dress, demanding to know what had happened. Okay, Carmen said, clapping her hands for attention. "Give the girls some space. Marcus, take the kids to the gym. Everyone else back to work. Sophia and I need to talk." Carmen's office was exactly as Sophia remembered it, cluttered with files and community announcements, walls covered with thank you cards from families and photos from countless events and celebrations. Sophia sank into the familiar chair across from Carmen's desk, her dress pooling around her like a silk sea. "Now," Carmen said, settling behind her desk with 2 cups of strong coffee, "tell me everything." So Sophia did. She told Carmen about the gradual changes, the small compromises that had added up to a complete transformation of herself,
She talked about the community center job she'd left because Richard thought it wasn't appropriate for someone in her position. She described the life that had been planned for her, the houses and the charity boards, and the carefully orchestrated social calendar that left no room for spontaneity or genuine connection. Carmen listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. When Sophia finished, they sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "You know what I'm going to say," Carmen finally said. "That I'm crazy for walking away from financial security and social status? Hell no! I'm going to say it's about time." Sophia looked up in surprise. Carmen leaned forward, her expression serious. "Sophie, I watched you change after you started dating that man. You were always so passionate about the work here, so connected to the families, so full of ideas for new programs. But gradually, you started pulling back. You'd check your phone constantly during meetings, worried about missing his calls. You started dressing differently, talking differently. You noticed?" "Of course I noticed. We all did. But you seemed happy, and we figured maybe that was just what love looked like for you. But I remember thinking at your going away party that you looked like you were mourning something." Sophia remembered that party. The cake from the Puerto Rican bakery down the street, the speeches about how much she'd be missed, the promises to stay in touch that had gradually faded as her new life took over. I was mourning. I was mourning myself. A knock at the door interrupted them. Marcus stuck his head in. "Sorry to bother you, but there are some people outside asking about Sophie. Well-dressed people, in expensive cars." Through the office window, Sophia could see her father's Mercedes parked at the curb, along with Richard's BMW. "They found me," she said. Carmen moved to the window and peered out. "That your people?" "My parents and my fiancé. Ex-fiancé, whatever he is now." "You want to see them?" Sophia considered this. She'd have to face them eventually, have to explain her decision and deal with the fallout, but she wasn't ready yet. She needed more time to solidify her resolve, to remember who she was before she faced the pressure to return to who she'd been trying to become. "Not yet," she said. "Is there a back way out?" Carmen grinned. "Honey, I've been helping people avoid unwanted visitors for 20 years. Of course there's a back way out." The basement of the community center was a labyrinth of storage rooms, mechanical equipment, and forgotten furniture from decades of fundraising events. Sophia led Sophia through the maze, with the confidence of someone who'd navigated these tunnels countless times, probably helping other people escape various forms of trouble over the years. "This connects to the old subway system," Carmen explained as they walked down a narrow corridor lined with water pipes. Not the T, the older tunnels they abandoned in the 1940s. The city pretends they don't exist, but half the buildings in this neighborhood connect to them somehow. They emerged into a wider tunnel, with tiled walls that had once been white, but were now stained with decades of water damage and neglect. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as their footsteps echoed in the empty space. "Where does this go?" Sophia asked, gathering her dress to keep it from dragging in the puddles. "Few different places. There's an exit near the train station, another one that comes up in the basement of the old Woolworth building. Depends on where you want to go." That was the question, wasn't it? Where did she want to go? For the first time in years, Sophia had complete freedom to choose, and the options felt overwhelming. "Carmen," she said as they walked, "can I ask you something?" "Shoot." "How did you know? When you were young, I mean. How did you know what you wanted to do with your life?" Carmen laughed, the sound echoing off the tunnel walls. "Honey, I didn't know anything when I was young. I was 17, pregnant, married to a man who thought my job was to cook and clean and keep quiet. Took me years to figure out I was worth more than that."
But you built all this, Sophia gestured vaguely toward the community center above them. You've helped so many people. Started small, Carmen said. After my divorce, I was working 3 jobs trying to make ends meet. One was cleaning offices downtown, fancy places where rich people made decisions about our neighborhood without ever setting foot in it, made me angry. They turned a corner and entered a slightly wider tunnel with what looked like an old subway platform. Anger's not a bad thing, Carmen continued. Anger tells you when something's wrong. The trick is figuring out what to do with it. Sophia thought about the anger that had been building inside her for months. Anger at herself for disappearing, anger at Richard for not seeing who she really was, anger at everyone who had pushed her toward a life that felt like wearing shoes that were 2 sizes too small. I'm angry, she admitted. I'm angry that I let myself get so lost. I'm angry that it took me this long to realize what was happening. Good, Carmen said firmly. Now what are you going to do about it?
They'd reached a junction where 3 tunnels met. Carmen stopped and turned to face Sophia fully. Look, mija, I'm not going to pretend this is going to be easy. You just walked away from a very comfortable life. There are going to be people who think you're crazy, who tell you that you made a mistake. There are going to be days when you wonder if they're right. But living someone else's life isn't really living at all. It's just a very elaborate form of hiding. Sophia nodded, feeling the truth of those words in her bones. The train station is that way, Carmen pointed down the left tunnel. You could disappear if you want to, start over somewhere new. The idea was tempting, a clean slate, a chance to rebuild herself without the weight of everyone's expectations and disappointments. Or, Carmen continued, pointing down the right tunnel, that way leads back toward the surface a few blocks from here. You could come back, face the music, and figure out how to live your real life in the world you know. What would you do? Carmen smiled. I'd probably run away to Mexico and open a beach bar. But I'm old and tired, and I've already done my fighting. You're young. You've got fire in you that I haven't seen since you first walked into my office 4 years ago. Above them, Sophia could hear the faint sound of footsteps and voices. Her search party was still looking for her, probably growing more frantic by the minute. In a few hours, there would be 300 wedding guests sitting down to a reception without a bride, trying to make sense of elaborate centerpieces and a 7-course meal while the groom explained why his fiancée had vanished. The thought should have filled her with guilt, but instead she felt oddly liberated. For years, she'd been so focused on not disappointing people that she'd forgotten to ask whether their expectations were worth meeting. I need to change clothes, she said suddenly. Carmen raised an eyebrow. Not much of a wardrobe selection down here. No, but there's got to be somewhere I can get out of this dress. I can't figure out my life while I'm wearing a costume for someone else's fantasy. The Woolworth Building, Carmen said decisively. There's a vintage shop on the ground floor, Luna's. Owner's a friend of mine. She stays late on Saturdays doing inventory. They headed down the middle tunnel, which sloped gently upward and grew brighter as they approached what looked like a service elevator. Carmen, Sophia said as they waited for the elevator to dive, ancient elevator to respond to the call button. Thank you for all of this. Don't thank me yet. The hard part's just beginning. Luna's Vintage was a treasure trove of decades' worth of carefully curated clothing, jewelry, and accessories. The shop occupied the ground floor of the old Woolworths building, and stepping into it from the basement tunnel felt like traveling through time. Art Deco fixtures cast warm light over racks of dresses from every era, while jazz music played softly from hidden speakers. Luna herself was a work of art, a black woman in her 60s with silver hair styled in victory rolls
and wearing a perfectly fitted 1940s suit that looked like it had been made for her. She looked up from the inventory sheets spread across the counter as Carmen and Sophia emerged from the back room. "Carmen? Honey, what are you?" She stopped mid-sentence as she took in Sophia's wedding dress. "Oh, my." "Luna, meet Sophie. She needs help." Luna's eyes swept over the elaborate dress, taking in every detail with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent decades working with vintage clothing. "Let me guess. Big wedding, cold feet, and now you need to disappear for a while?" "Something like that," Sophia said. "Well, you've come to the right place. That dress is beautiful, but it's not you, is it?" The observation was so accurate, it took Sophia's breath away. "How can you tell?" 40 years in this business, honey, you learn to read people through their clothes. That dress was chosen by someone who wanted you to look like a princess in a fairy tale. But you're not a princess. You're a warrior who's been playing dress up. Luna walked around Sophia, studying the dress from every angle. Custom made, probably cost more than most people's cars, but look at how you're standing, like you're wearing armor that doesn't fit. She was right. Sophia had been unconsciously holding herself differently in the elaborate gown, walking more carefully, sitting more primly, even breathing more shallowly to avoid disturbing the perfect lines of the bodice. "What size are you, honey? Your real size, not whatever size they squeezed you into for the stress." 10? Sophia admitted. She'd lost 15 pounds for the wedding, under pressure from the dress designer and Richard's gentle suggestions about looking her best for the photographs that would hang in their home for the rest of their lives. "Thought so. You look like you haven't eaten a real meal in months." Luna disappeared into the Rex, muttering to herself as she pulled various items. "Here we go. Try this." She handed Sophia a flowing bohemian dress in deep jewel tones, the kind of thing Sophia used to wear all the time, but had gradually purged from her wardrobe as Richard's influence grew stronger. "The dressing room is back there," Luna said, pointing toward a curtained alcove. "And honey, take your time. Transformation isn't something you rush." The dressing room was small but comfortable, with a vintage mirror and a velvet chair that had seen better decades. Sophia struggled with the dozens of tiny buttons that ran down the back of the wedding dress, buttons that had required Jessica's help that morning and would have required Richard's help later that night during the intimate moments she'd been dreading almost as much as the ceremony itself. When the dress finally fell away, pooling at her feet in an expensive puddle of silken lace, Sophia felt like she could breathe fully for the first time in months. The bohemian dress slipped over her head like a second skin, the soft fabric draping naturally over her curves instead of forcing them into an artificial silhouette. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone she recognized, not the society wife she'd been becoming, but the woman she'd been before all of this started. Her hair had begun to escape its elaborate updo, curls springing free around her face. Her makeup, so carefully applied that morning, was smudged from crying and running and hugging Carmen, making her look human instead of like a porcelain doll. "How does it feel?" Luna called through the curtain. "Like myself," Sophia called back, surprised by the emotion in her own voice. When she emerged, both Luna and Carmen smiled with satisfaction. "Much better," Carmen said. "Now you look like the Sophie I remember." Luna handed her a pair of comfortable sandals and a vintage leather jacket. "You'll need these. It gets cold at night, and I have a feeling you're going to be doing some walking tonight." "I can't afford all this," Sophia realized. Her wallet was in Richard's apartment, and the small beaded purse she'd carried contained just only emergency makeup and her phone. "Who said anything about payment?" Luna waved dismissively. "This is an investment in a young woman's future. Besides, I have a feeling that dress is worth more than my entire inventory."
Sophia looked down at the wedding dress, now lying across a chair like a deflated dream. What should I do with it? Leave it here for now, Luna said. If you decide you want it back, you know where to find it. If not, well, maybe someday another young woman will need a beautiful dress for a wedding she actually wants to be at. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows of the Luis Rivera Community Center as Sophia finished organizing the files for the new Immigration Assistance Program. She was wearing comfortable jeans and a sweater that belonged to her now, clothes that felt like her own skin rather than a costume she was performing in. Her phone buzzed with a text from an
Sophia, this is Richard. I hope you're well. Catherine and I are engaged. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Thank you for having the courage to save us both from a mistake. I hope you found what you were looking for. She smiled, surprising herself. Richard had found someone who could be the wife he needed, someone who genuinely belonged in his world. And she had found her way back to herself. Carmen appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing the satisfied expression she got when something had gone particularly well. The Martinez family just got their citizenship approved. All 7 of them. They're having a celebration party this weekend, and they want to invite the whole neighborhood. That's wonderful, Sophia said, accepting the coffee gratefully. Maria must be over the moon. She cried for 10 minutes when she called to let.
Tell me. Carmen settled into the chair across from Sophia's desk. You know, I've been thinking. About what? About you. About how different you are from the woman who showed up here 6 months ago in a wedding dress. Sophia looked around the office that had become her second home again, at the thank you cards from families covering the walls, at the photos from community events and celebrations. I feel different, like I'm finally living in my own life instead of just visiting someone else's. Any regrets? Sophia considered the question seriously. She thought about the comfortable life she'd walked away from, the financial security, the social status. Then she thought about Maria Martinez, who'd become a U.S. citizen next week because of the help Sophia had provided, about the after-school program that was thriving because she'd written the grant that funded it, about the fact that she woke up every morning excited about the day ahead instead of trying to figure out how to get through it. None, she said finally. For the first time in my adult life, I have absolutely no regrets. As if on cue, her phone rang. Maya, her college roommate, calling from San Francisco. Sophie, I just got the most amazing news. There's a position opening up with a nonprofit that works with refugees. It's exactly the kind of work you love, and it's here in the Bay Area. Want me to send you the details? 6 months ago, the offer would have been tempting, a chance to start completely over, to disappear into a new city where no one knew her story. But now, looking around the community center where she'd found her purpose, thinking about the families who counted on her and the programs she was building, Sophia knew exactly where she belonged. Thanks, Maya, but I'm exactly where I need to be. After she hung up, Carmen raised her coffee cup in a mock toast to Sophie Martinez, who finally came home to herself. To second chances, Sophia replied, clinking her mug against Carmen's, and to the courage to take them. Through the window, she could see the community garden where kids were learning to grow their own food, the mural wall where local artists were painting the neighborhood story, the basketball court where teenagers gathered every afternoon to play and dream about their futures. It wasn't the life anyone had planned for her, but it was undeniably, authentically hers. And for the first time since she could remember, that was more than enough.